I'm Miss Zoe Reyes, 21 years old. I call myself a writer, for now. I have an older brother. His name is Mr. Axel Reyes, 30 years old. He works at a big company after graduating from college. Our parents passed away in a car accident when I was in 9th grade. I fell into depression from the shock and became a hermit. As a result, I couldn't go to high school. Afterward, I went to a doctor and recovered, thanks to my brother's help. When our parents died, my brother had just started working after graduating from college. He faced a tough situation right away, but took care of me, even helping with the housework. I decided to start doing what I could, little by little, like cleaning my room, the house, and then laundry and cooking, regaining my daily life with my brother's help. Now, we live together in the house our parents left behind. We split housework, but since I mainly work from home, I'm in charge of preparing meals and shopping. Going out for groceries is a nice change of pace. I also find cooking enjoyable, coming up with menus and following recipes. So, I'm good at cooking. When I was a hermit, my brother bought me a laptop. "Take a look at the unknown world with this," he said, and I explored various worlds on the internet. I started wanting to visit places I found in photos and videos on video sharing sites and forums, and my brother took me there, or I went alone. Without my brother's support, I might still be a hermit. Eventually, I learned about remote work. Gradually, I began working and had more chances to go out, returning to a normal life. After our parents passed away, my brother became like a parent to me. He's both kind and strict, a person with a good balance. He studied hard, which is why he was able to get a job at a big company after attending a national university. 7 years have passed since he joined the company, and now he is a team leader. There was a change in my brother. He had always been shy around women, but as his friends got married one after another, he finally started dating someone he met through a friend's introduction. 2 years later, she proposed and they decided to get married. One day, he invited me to meet someone over dinner. It was a Japanese-style restaurant. My brother shyly introduced the woman who would become my sister-in-law. Her name is Miss Nora Reyes. She graduated from the same university as my brother and is 2 years younger. She works as an office lady at a major food company. Her wavy, semi-long hair makes her look older than her age. "Nice to meet you. I'm Zoe, the sister. Please take care of my brother." "Likewise. I'm Miss Nora Reyes. You're such a cute sister. I always wanted a sister, so I'm really happy you'll become one," she said with a smile. She wore slightly heavy makeup, but she seemed like a lovely woman. Then, she asked about me. "Since Axel went to a good university, I assume you graduated from a decent one too, Zoe?" My brother answered for me. "Well, actually, Zoe didn't go to college. When our parents died in an accident, she was in 9th grade. She struggled with her mental health. It took her some time to recover. Of course, she can live a normal life now." "What? She was sick in 9th grade? So she couldn't attend high school either?" Nora seemed very surprised and pressed further. I added to my brother's explanations, since it was about me. "Yes, that's right. I caused trouble for my brother because of my illness. But thanks to him, I was able to recover. No amount of gratitude is enough for what he did." "I see. I understand now. Nora, my brother may look a bit older because of his struggles, but he has a great personality. Please look beyond appearances." "What are you talking about?" I tried to lighten the mood with a joke since the conversation became serious, but Nora didn't laugh. At the time, I thought Nora was moved by what my brother had done for me. From what I heard, Nora's parents both graduated from prestigious universities, and their entire family had attended college. Naturally, they had excellent grades and worked at well-known companies, with many in professional roles like doctors and lawyers. They were an impressive family. Nora's father was an executive at a major publishing company, and her mother was the president of a local women's association. Hearing that, I thought my brother was going to join a great family. Busy with work, my brother steadily prepared for the wedding. Seeing him happy made me happy too, and I helped out with various tasks. One day, I received a call on my smartphone. I was a little nervous about answering a call from an unknown person, but the number was displayed, so I answered. "Who is this?" "Zoe, I'm Nora's mother. Nice to meet you." To my surprise, the caller was Nora's mother, who would become my mother-in-law. "What can I do for you?" Feeling anxious, I asked, and she replied, "I heard from Nora the other day that you didn't attend high school and only graduated from middle school." I didn't know what she wanted to say, but I answered honestly. Yes, when my parents died in an accident, I suffered from mental health issues, and it took me a long time to fully recover. That's why I couldn't go to high school." "I sympathize with your situation, but the fact remains that you only have a middle school education, right?" "Yes." "I see. I have a favor to ask. Could you please not attend Axel and Nora's wedding ceremony? Actually, don't attend." "What do you mean?" I was taken aback by the sudden, outrageous request. "Axel and Nora both graduated from top universities, and my husband and I also graduated from college. Of course, all our relatives have college degrees." "Yes? What about it?" "You're not very smart, are you? No wonder you only finished middle school." With a sigh, my mother-in-law continued the conversation. "You see, as I mentioned earlier, our family is made up of elites. Graduating from college is a given, and we hold prestigious jobs like executives at big corporations, doctors, lawyers. These are the kind of impressive people attending the wedding." I began to understand what she was getting at. "So, we don't want you, a middle school graduate, at such an event. Actually, we'd rather you not come." "But I'm the sister of the groom and his only family. I can't just not attend." "Please don't come anyway. How could we introduce you, a middle school graduate, to our relatives without feeling embarrassed? Do you understand? Anyway, I've told you our wishes." How rude. After hanging up, I trembled with anger. The parents on the other side disliked me because of my middle school education, as they were too concerned with appearances and reputation. At least, I never thought of my life as embarrassing, and I believed that I didn't deserve to be looked down upon by others. But what if my presence made my brother unhappy? If I stepped back, my brother could have a happy marriage and a future beyond that. I've caused him a lot of trouble, so I want him to be happy, no matter what. I can't be the one to ruin that. But I also couldn't stand being dismissed. My thoughts were all jumbled up. I talked to my brother about the situation. He said, "Don't worry. You're my sister, my only family. Feel free to attend my wedding. I'll protect you, no matter what." "But if I cause trouble for you, I don't mind not attending." "There's no way you'll cause trouble. Zoe, you're my one and only sister. If I can't protect my sister, what kind of brother would I be?" "Thank you, brother." Encouraged by his words, I decided to attend the wedding. And on the day of the wedding, at the family introduction, when my uncle introduced me as our family representative, my sister-in-law's parents looked at me with disdain. My brother seemed to notice their attitude. At the reception, the seats for the bride and groom's families were at the back, facing the main table. I wondered if there might not be a seat prepared for me, but there was. As I sat down, I felt piercing stares. Sure enough, my mother-in-law was looking at me. She marched over to me and said, "Why are you here? I told you not to come because you'd be a disgrace to our family, didn't I?" "I am his real sister. There's no reason for me not to attend," I strongly replied, and she snapped back, "For a middle school graduate, you sure are insolent. Just remember this." Leaving those harsh words behind, my mother-in-law walked away. Soon, the bride and groom entered the room. Seeing my brother in a different atmosphere than usual, I couldn't help but smile. Nora was beautifully dressed and sparkling. As soon as the mediator finished speaking, my mother-in-law suddenly stood up and talked to the MC. Then, she grabbed the microphone and started speaking loudly. "Our family has all graduated from college and hold respectable jobs. I believe that Axel is a suitable person for our family. But there is one issue." She took a breath and continued. "It is his middle school graduate sister. She is an incredibly embarrassing presence in our family. We would like to ask the groom to sever ties with her. If he can't, we cannot allow this marriage." There was a commotion in the room, but my mother-in-law ignored it and turned to my brother. "Axel, can you swear to do that here? Swear to cut ties with this embarrassing middle school graduate sister and become a part of our excellent family." As if it were obvious, both the bride and father-in-law nodded. Then, with a triumphant look, she handed the microphone to my brother. Taking the microphone, my brother took a deep breath and answered, "Indeed, my sister is a middle school graduate, but she is my only blood relative, my family, since our parents have passed away. I can't sever ties with her. I apologize to all of you who have attended today, but I will cancel the marriage and consider this relationship with this family as non-existent. This is my answer." With that, my brother slammed the microphone down on the table and came straight to me. With a refreshed smile, he spoke to me. "Zoe, I'm sorry for causing trouble. There's no need for us to be here. Let's go home." Later, I heard from the relatives who attended that the reception was canceled because the groom left halfway through. The bride burst in tears, and her parents were scolded by the relatives and had to apologize on their hands and knees. They were also forced to return the gift money. Later, my uncle contacted my brother. He said that although his attitude at the reception wasn't praiseworthy, he would have severed ties with him if it had continued. He also offered to pay a suitable amount of consolation money and have the bride's side bear all the expenses for the ceremony, but my brother refused. He conveyed that he wanted a sincere apology for his sister rather than a monetary solution. After a while, a meeting was arranged at our home for post-settlement discussions. I made up my mind to show my former in-laws a thing or two. At the meeting, my ex-sister-in-law and her parents, a total of 3 people, came. They handed my brother some money as a gift, an inconvenience fee, and apologized for the rudeness at the reception. But it didn't feel like a sincere apology. There was a sense of reluctance. As for my ex-mother-in-law, she said things like, "We should have investigated more thoroughly. If we had, this wouldn't have happened," showing no sign of remorse. My ex-father-in-law also continued, "Axel should have told us about his sister in detail from the beginning. Then we wouldn't have ended up unhappy." Anger welled up inside me, and I carried out my prepared plan. "Ex-father-in-law, well, you're not really my stepfather anymore, but for convenience, I'll call you that. You work at Rainbow Publishing, right?" He glanced at me and said, "Yeah, I do.
I'm a director there. What about it?
He looked down on me. I work with Rainbow Publishing, but I can't bring myself to like a company where you are. I want to terminate the contract.
Is that all? I don't care. There are plenty of workers. It won't have any impact.
Understood. I'll quit immediately. And I'll sign a contract with your rival company.
Go ahead. Do as you please.
With my ex-father-in-law's arrogance in my peripheral vision, I called the editor at Rainbow Publishing and informed them about the contract termination. There was a commotion on the other end of the phone, but I only conveyed what I wanted to say and hung up. Then, I called the rival company and told them I wanted to proceed with the contract. Even after my call, my ex-father-in-law remained smug. My brother, unable to grasp the situation, looked around nervously. Eventually, a call came to my ex-father-in-law's smartphone.
Hello? It's me. Yeah.
What?
The president? What's going on?
Then, he suddenly whispered, and his face turned pale. After finishing the call, my ex-father-in-law turned to me and said,
Are you the popular author? Yes, Ray?
Well, yeah. Yes, Ray is my pen name for light novels. So what?
So, you mean our president said a popular author is breaking the contract with us, and it's my fault?
I just asked you if it was okay to terminate the contract. And you said it didn't matter. That's all there is to it. I said it calmly. You're an elite, right? Isn't it embarrassing for you to deal with a middle school dropout like me?
I'm sorry. I apologize. But can you reconsider terminating the contract?
Seeing my father-in-law's sudden change in attitude, my ex-sister-in-law asked curiously, "Why would you be so humble to a mere middle school dropout girl?"
Idiot! You're our publishing house's top author. If you leave, the damage to our company would be enormous. The president told me to take responsibility. At this rate, I'll be demoted.
What? Really?
Yeah.
If that happens, it'll be too embarrassing to associate with our relatives.
Please, do something.
My ex-sister-in-law and her parents were confused and turning against each other.
Please, can you reconsider?
It's impossible. The matter is settled, so please leave. My brother also sided with me.
Then, please leave as requested.
My brother and I smiled as we saw the three of them leave our house, shoulders slumped. After the three left, my brother said,
"You're a popular author? I didn't know that either."
"Well, I used a pen name. When I posted a work I wrote last year online, it got good reviews. Rainbow Publishing offered me a contract. I've been making quite a bit of money," I explained proudly. My brother's smile brightened. It had been a long time since I'd seen him smile like that. And so, the broken engagement was resolved. My ex-sister-in-law seemed to be looking for another partner. But no one would approach her since the incident became widely known. She became reclusive and eventually quit her job. My ex-father-in-law, being blamed for my contract termination, was demoted to a regular employee. Unable to endure warehouse work, he resigned. My ex-mother-in-law was harshly criticized by her relatives for her disgraceful behavior at the wedding reception and was no longer recognized by her once proud and accomplished family. It serves them right. My new publisher supported me, and my popular work was turned into a comic. Its popularity rose again, and now there's a talk of an anime adaptation. My brother is burying the memory of the wedding as a dark history and working hard. I'm eagerly waiting for a wonderful person to impair my brother's life. At last, our days have returned to being peaceful. I'm still racking my brain over creating light novels, but I feel that the repetition of these days is happiness. I'm planning to go on a trip with my brother again, taking our late parents' house with us, who passed away in the accident.
Just after the funeral of my mother-in-law, whom I loved like a real mother, a letter arrived from her. A lawyer brought the letter to our house. I am Sharon, 43 years old. The letter began, "If this letter has reached you, it means I am no longer in this world. I'm worried you might be crying." Seeing the familiar handwriting of my mother-in-law, my eyes welled up. My father-in-law passed away at a young age, long before my husband and I got married, and there seemed to be no close relatives in his family, with almost zero family interaction. My husband and I were not blessed with children, so we lived modestly but happily with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law and I got along so well that my husband would say, "You two are like a real mother and daughter, and I'm like the son-in-law." Last year, my husband passed away from cancer, and it was just my mother-in-law and me. Then, she suddenly became a victim of a traffic accident. There were many mysterious points about the accident, and for some reason, my mother-in-law was found collapsed on a road in a city where she should have had no connection, and she was hit by a passing car. The police are investigating both the incident and the accident, but her supposed bag hasn't been found. I was asked various circumstances by the police, but I didn't know much, and I couldn't respond properly due to the shock. I can't sort out my feelings about my sudden parting with my mother-in-law. In my husband's case, we had a year of medical treatment, and my mother-in-law was there, so we could remember him to our heart's content. We promised to overcome our grief together and continue living in harmony. While there were things to do like the funeral and administrative procedures, my mind was distracted. But once everything was over, I suddenly became lonely. My own parents had already passed away due to cancer. I have a brother, but he lives in the countryside far away with his family. Even if I wanted to talk to my old friends from my student days, it's difficult because they are all in the midst of raising children. Then, a man claiming to be a lawyer called me. Judging from his voice, he was probably in his 70s, around the same age as my mother-in-law. He apologized for being late to notice my mother-in-law's death and said that there was something he wanted to give me as soon as possible. Is it a letter from my mother-in-law? I had never heard that my mother-in-law had been in contact with a lawyer, and I didn't understand the meaning of receiving a letter from a deceased person. I thought it might be a scam, but I decided to meet the lawyer in case the letter was really from my mother-in-law. The letter continued, "I know you're surprised by this sudden letter from me, but please listen. There is danger approaching you. Believe my words and run away immediately." Reading up to here, I asked the lawyer sitting in front of me, "Excuse me, do you know the content of this letter? Was my mother-in-law targeted by someone?" Indeed, the handwriting was my mother-in-law's. It was characterized by her unique quirks, and I recognized it instantly, but I couldn't make sense of the content. The turn of events is so dramatic it can only be likened to a poorly crafted prank. My mother-in-law passed away in a car accident, but the driver has already been apprehended. The driver testified that he found my mother-in-law lying in the road, and that's why the discovery was late. My mother-in-law had signs of being hit, suggesting she might have lost consciousness from it, I was told. If this letter is true, my mother-in-law must have had a suspicion of who had attacked her. Did she know she would get tangled in this incident? If so, why didn't she run away? I felt the tears welling up again. The lawyer, composed as ever, said, "I haven't read the contents, but I believe I could guess what it's about." Somewhat irritated by his roundabout way of speaking, I ventured to ask, "So, what did you hear from my mother-in-law?" "Well, I was the one who represented Oliver at that time and have been asked to help you," he responded. "Who's Oliver?" According to the lawyer, my husband apparently has a brother 6 years older than him. I had never heard a word about this from either my mother-in-law or my husband, nor had I ever seen any photos. The lawyer started pulling out files that looked like documents from a bag by the side of the table. Sharon, do you know that half of the serious crimes in our country happen within families? He said, a hint of irony in his voice. Tragically, the place where we should feel safe and the most content, the family home, is where these heartbreaking incidents of a family member taking another family member's life occur. And with that, he showed me an old photo featuring 4 people. A young man and woman who looked like parents, a boy, and a baby. The young woman looked familiar. It was my mother-in-law. I thought the young man was a stranger at first, but he resembled my husband. The boy also bore a resemblance to the young man, undeniably appearing as father and son. It looked like it could have been taken during a trip to the beach. They were posing in front of a large ship at the port, all with happy smiles on their faces. The boy with the float, that's Oliver, the lawyer told me. Upon being told, I stared at the boy, my husband's brother, who I knew nothing of. The photo looked so happy, and I couldn't help but feel a pain in my chest, wondering what could have possibly happened. Does being a lawyer mean Oliver caused some incident? Was he the one who assaulted my mother-in-law this time? It must have been like more than 17 or 18 years ago, considering my husband and I were dating 15 years prior to our marriage. Otherwise, it would be strange for me to have known nothing about this. Yes, Oliver became a recluse from the summer of his first year in junior high due to bullying, and 7 years later he caused an incident, he explained. It seems Oliver, in despair about his future after becoming a recluse, attempted to commit family suicide. Late at night, on the day of the incident, he went into his parents' room with a knife and ended up struggling with his father, who woke up due to the noise. Even while severely injured, his father was able to subdue Oliver, and the incident ended in an attempted crime. However, upon hearing his mother scream during the struggle between his father and Oliver, my husband, who was 14 at the time, called the police. Police cars and ambulances rushed to the scene, causing a brief stir in the usually quiet residential area. At the time, societal issues such as hermits and NEETs were becoming common, and the media would sensationally report on stories like a reclusive boy planning a murder-suicide with his family. I remember hearing news like this, but I had no idea if it was referring to the husband's family or not. After all, similar stories were often reported in the media. However, it was different for those involved. The husband's family, unable to withstand the rumors, ended up moving house several times, almost like fleeing in the night. Whether it was due to the severe injuries at the time or the subsequent stress, the father-in-law passed away a few years later. The mother-in-law and the husband changed their names back to the mother-in-law's maiden name, and it was said that they were finally able to lead a normal life in their current place. Both the perpetrator and the victim are family, so there's no outlet for emotions in family incidents. You can't fully hate or detest. Any person would be confused if suddenly put in such a complicated situation. Living under the public eye, rumors, and bashing is very hard. I hope you can empathize with the feelings of the deceased who couldn't talk to you, Sharon, the man summarized. I was at a loss for words due to the harshness of it all. I had never considered what happened to the family after such an incident, but as long as they are alive, life goes on. The in-laws must have seen the boy, Oliver, as their adorable child. The photo of Oliver that I was shown had a smile that greatly resembled my husband's, but the button that was mistakenly buttoned couldn't be fixed, and he ended up facing the worst tragedy. Later, Oliver was sentenced to actual imprisonment and was said to have served time. When the lawyer started explaining at length, I represented Oliver, remember? The same punishment applies even for an attempt, life imprisonment, or at least 5 to 20 years in prison. I interrupted him by asking, a minimum of 5 years? Are you saying Oliver could be out already? Yes, he was actually released about 2 years ago. According to the lawyer, the prosecutor's office has a victim notification system. After a verdict is confirmed, you can apply to the prosecutor's office to be notified about the planned release date of the offender, or even after they have been released. Even without that, the mother-in-law is Oliver's biological mother. She had been notified of his residence after his release. Around that time, my husband had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing treatment, and the mother-in-law didn't want to worry him, so it seems she couldn't consult with him. Oliver told me at the time that he committed the crime because he was pessimistic about his future. With some hesitation, the lawyer told me, it seems he wanted money to spend. Oliver, who had been a shut-in for many years, had started to secretly use the mother-in-law's credit card to pay for online games and online shopping, and he had been scolded by his father. Apparently, he had used a lot of money to buy weapons for a game on the evening of the crime and had his computer taken away. Oliver lied to the lawyer, and his real father, mother, and brother who knew the truth said nothing. While they hoped Oliver would genuinely reflect on his actions and serve his punishment, they did not reveal the inside story of the post-release defamation and slander. Was this out of familial love? Truth be told, my mother-in-law was often visiting Oliver, my brother-in-law, who was serving time in prison. Every time she went, she would come back disappointed by Oliver's unchanging, unrepentant demeanor. She was afraid to live with Oliver again after his release. The danger of violence was part of the fear, but she knew if she or her son were to die, Oliver would come to me asking for money. As his release date approached, there was an increase in tedious paperwork. She had to decide where to house him. Distressed, my mother-in-law decided to consult a lawyer who knew about the case and ask him to handle the procedures. What was Oliver doing for a living 2 years ago? It turned out that through the lawyer, she had been helping Oliver by renting an apartment for him. She would do his shopping. She was giving him money saved in her dresser and her own retirement savings. The inheritance she would receive if her son, in other words, her own child, died. After his release, Oliver became a shut-in again and did not work. Money is limited, and through the lawyer, my mother-in-law conveyed, I can't support you forever. You need to start working on your own. But Oliver flatly refused. Doesn't my mother love me? She's always favoring my brother. She won't give me money because my brother told her not to. He made a big fuss. The lawyer said, although it may have been an accident, the deceased was worried that Oliver might cause some trouble. He kept insisting that I give him money. Oliver became aggressive towards the lawyer as well and seemed to be asking in detail about my mother-in-law's income and current life of his father and brother. Fortunately, I don't think he knows our address, but I'm worried that his apartment is near where the deceased died. At that moment, I remembered that the bag was not found. Then the doorbell rang. The only expected visitor was the lawyer. Excuse me for a moment. I excused myself and headed to the entrance. I had a bad feeling. When I checked through the peephole, there was a man standing who looked a lot like my husband. I could see the bag that my mother-in-law used to use. Quietly retreated to the living room and called the lawyer. I think, it might be Oliver. What should we do? He has my mother-in-law's bag. My voice was shaking with tension, and the lawyer's face stiffened. Call the police right now. I might have meant to call the police, but I was too upset. I ran out the back door to the nearby police station. Did my mother-in-law and husband foresee this situation in the future? Or did they unconsciously choose a house near the police? I don't know anymore. Afterwards, when Oliver saw the police officers who came with me, he immediately tried to run away and was caught by a police officer who then interviewed him. As I suspected, the man who looked like my husband was Oliver, in other words, my brother-in-law. The lawyer called him Oliver, which was probably his name at the time, and I had been calling him Oliver because I had seen a family photo from when he was a small boy with a hint of innocence, but in reality, he was an unhealthy-looking middle-aged man. It strangely angered me that he looked like my husband. This man had been tormenting my mother-in-law and husband. "I'm just here to collect my share, your mom's inheritance. It exists, right? Even my younger brother died last year. Hand over my inheritance." Ignoring the police officer's questions, my brother-in-law Oliver yelled at me. What nerve does he have? I was furious. I sympathized with his childhood, being teased to the point of not going to school. But his actions thereafter were selfish and unforgivable. More than anything, what I wanted to ask was, "Isn't that your mother's bag you're holding? What did you do to her? Did you lay hands on a frail woman?" Upon hearing my words, the officers also looked at the bag that Oliver was holding. In a fluster, Oliver tried to hide it, but it was too late. As one officer reached out his hand, Oliver snarled at him. "Hey, this is my money. I can't help it." It was the last thing my mom said. "I only hit her a few times to teach her a lesson for being cheeky." Oliver's thought process made me shudder. There was no sense in his words, and he showed no remorse. Moreover, "Hey, you are my brother's wife, aren't you? Neither my mom nor my brother are here anymore. You have an obligation to support me." Maybe my mother-in-law and husband hid Oliver's existence from me, fearing this situation. They must have thought that if I didn't know, I could avoid getting involved. No, Mrs. Sharon, you don't have that obligation. The lawyer interrupted, but I doubted that the law would work on Oliver. Oliver was ultimately an invincible man with nothing to lose. He doesn't understand common sense, nor does he seem to want to abide by the law. Maybe that's why my mother-in-law never wanted me to meet him. I can only imagine how difficult her life must have been. I haven't finished reading it all, but my mother-in-law left me a letter worrying about me, knowing her life was in danger. Her pain and sadness are heartbreaking. Because of you, my mother-in-law and husband were hurt so much. I will never forgive you. You will face the law. Indeed, the direct cause was being hit by a car. However, he left my unconscious mother-in-law on the road. He is not a person who should be left to roam the streets. I pledged to myself that I would do whatever it takes to send him back to prison. Watching me, the lawyer stood beside me and said, "I'll help you." Oliver was taken to the police station. The blood on my mother-in-law's bag and circumstantial evidence pointed to Oliver as the culprit, and he was sent back to prison again. I returned home with the lawyer and read my mother-in-law's letter to the end. Her letter was filled with apologies to me and overflowing love, especially the end. "Life is still long. Please live a happier, freer life, Sharon." Upon seeing that, I couldn't stop my tears.
From the time we exchanged greetings, my sister-in-law didn't seem to like me. She would stare at me from head to toe with a piercing gaze and laugh at me under her breath. At the time, I could only guess that she was making fun of the way I looked. I must have seemed like someone she could easily make fun of or put down to make herself feel better. That's why, when she asked for my help, I refused. I couldn't think of a single reason for me to help her. A story by Maria Bailey. My name is Maria. I got married to my husband 3 years ago, and now we live with my in-laws. My father-in-law passed away when my husband was a student, so today it's me, my husband, and my sister-in-law and mother-in-law living together. Initially, there was no plan to live together. It was just my husband and me. However, a year after getting married, my mother-in-law had an accident and hurt her leg, so we decided to move in with her so that we could help care for her. My sister-in-law, Dorothy, was already living at home, but finally my mother-in-law tearfully told my husband that she was unreliable. As it turned out, Dorothy wasn't contributing to the household expenses at all. She was single and spent her money going out to bars and clubs. It would be nice if she could have at least supported her mother, but instead she caused trouble by maxing out credit cards, asking her mom for money, or leaving her to do all the housework, even though she had a bad leg from her accident. Honestly, I think my mother-in-law is far too lenient on her daughter. Dorothy is in her late 20s, but I guess parents always feel compelled to take care of their children, no matter how old they are. That's why, even though my mother-in-law admits her daughter is unreliable, she feels she can't kick her out and lets her stay at home. Of course, I didn't want to live with them. My mother-in-law is a kind and gentle person, but that's a separate issue, and it takes some resolve to suddenly learn how to live together, no matter how nice the person is. And above all, I hated the idea of living with my sister-in-law. I wouldn't have lived with Dorothy, even if I were paid to. I felt she looked down on me since the beginning of our marriage. To put it simply, Dorothy is like the controlling leader who would rotate out one friend at a time from the group during school days. I might sound childish for saying this, but I've always thought she was a malicious person who never grew out of that habit of using people for her own advantage. I felt that she didn't like me from the moment my husband introduced me to her. She asked my name, and when I answered, she stifled a laugh. I'm 32 years old. Turns out that laugh was because I was younger than she had thought. I'm sorry. I thought you were about 40. You look so mature. To put it bluntly, she probably wanted to say that I looked older. Since then, every time she saw me, she would ask about the brands of my clothes, comment on my appearance, and look down on me with a mocking laugh. A grown-up over 30 wearing fast fashion. Oh my, but Maria seems out of touch, doesn't she? Were you homeschooled or something? You don't seem like you'd get along with the fashionistas like my friends are. Of course, I'm not the type to stand out, and I'm not particularly interested in fashion. Dorothy may be able to believe that I don't dress well, but that doesn't mean she has any right to ridicule me. Moreover, I do have friends. Not many, but they're there. I feel sorry for the people who say they like me when I'm being ridiculed so much. I knew we didn't get along immediately, but it has only seemed to get worse. If she's going to have this attitude, I decided that I just need to avoid her as much as possible. With that in mind, I decided to ignore her without arguing or pointing out her faults in return. All of a sudden, my mother-in-law needed help, and the discussion of living together came up. I told my husband that I absolutely didn't want to live with Dorothy, but then my mother-in-law called and asked if I would reconsider. My mother-in-law was 62 at the time, and apparently had plans to move into a senior living facility with support services when she turned 65 in 3 more years. She asked if we could please share a home until then. Faced with such a desperate plea, I couldn't find the words to refuse. Limited-term cohabitation. It was a big ask, but it was only for a fixed amount of time. That was my motivation for deciding to live together. So that's the backstory, and now my husband and I are living with his mother and sister. It's already been 2 years, so there's only about 1 year left. My mother-in-law is keeping her promise and is actively looking for supportive housing facilities so the cohabitation won't drag on indefinitely. I feel a little guilty, as if I'm driving her out, but my mother-in-law, sensing my feelings, reassures me that this was her intention from the beginning. She probably wanted to take her time sorting out the house during these 3 years. In retrospect, I feel a little guilty for not agreeing to live together from the start. Of course, the idea of living with my sister-in-law was truly unpleasant, so I needed time to brace myself, and living with her has been difficult. Even now, I struggle with the day-to-day interactions of sharing a home with her. When we first started living together, she was particularly harsh on me, complaining about the food I cooked and constantly criticizing my cleaning. My mother-in-law and husband would scold her for complaining, but she seemed completely unfazed. It feels like she doesn't think of me as her brother's wife, but more like a slave or a maid. For about a week, I was blamed for the way I washed her clothes. You shrank my clothes because of the detergent you chose. They're all misshapen and unwearable now. You've been married for 3 years and you still can't handle housework. You are essentially useless. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't my fault the clothes shrank. It was actually because my sister-in-law had gained weight. However, I didn't want to comment on someone's appearance. I know how hurtful those comments can be. I said I'd be more careful next time and tried to end the conversation. But my sister-in-law is not the type to forgive and forget any mistake made against her. When my mother-in-law's acquaintance visited our home, Dorothy laughed as she talked about how terrible I was at housework. Of course my mother-in-law defended me, but Dorothy insisted there was no need and kept talking as if I were a completely useless home appliance, not a human being or her relative. Sometimes I'd argue back, but mostly I'd just nod and let her talk wash over me. I didn't want to stoop to her level, and I knew that arguing with her would be a waste of breath. I told my mother-in-law and husband that after we stop living together this year, I don't want to have anything to do with Dorothy, and both of them agreed. It might be a bit spiteful, but I think Dorothy will struggle when my mother-in-law moves into a senior living facility. She's been living at home and spending her salary however she wants. I don't think someone like that can suddenly live on her own responsibly. We won't help her once we stop living together. That's my little revenge. But sometimes it seems like even God is on my sister-in-law's side. She told me that her boyfriend had proposed to her. My boyfriend's tall, and he's handsome. He's so kind. He has a great job at a huge company, so I'm basically marrying into money. I'm so glad I put effort into my looks and fashion. I wouldn't want a miserable life like someone I know living with in-laws after marriage. She chuckled while looking at me, making it obvious she was talking about me. Dorothy stood before me, smirking, and said, "I bet you thought I wouldn't be able to live on my own without my mom. Too bad for you, old lady." I couldn't help but blush a little because she hit the nail on the head with what I was thinking about her. At the same time, I felt a strong wave of frustration. "Congratulations on your engagement. But married life is tough, you know." She might complain about me not being able to do housework, but the one who really can't do anything is Dorothy. It was the best comeback I could muster, but she just looked triumphant. "Are you trying to act tough because I won't be around? My fiancé is rich and will hire a professional housekeeper, not someone useless like you." I was utterly defeated. I swore I would never see Dorothy again once we stopped living together. I swallowed my pride and decided to avoid her as much as possible at home for the remaining time we had as housemates. A month after Dorothy's announcement, her fiancé came to visit. I thought anyone who would choose her must not be a good person. I even had such a terrible thought. I had been warned by Dorothy not to introduce myself to her fiancé. "I don't consider you family. Once you've served tea, just go away. I'm not inviting you to the wedding anyway." I felt relieved when I heard those words. I just wanted to cut ties with her as soon as possible. When her fiancé arrived, I reluctantly served tea as instructed. Knowing this might be the first and last time we'd meet, I stole a quick glance at Dorothy's fiancé's face. As I did so, our eyes met. And it was inevitable. "You are—" As her fiancé began to speak, Dorothy interrupted, saying it wasn't a big deal. "She's our housekeeper, so you don't have to worry, Steve. I told you before, right, that I have a useless sister-in-law who can't do anything. It's a loss just to get involved with her, so you can ignore her." Upon hearing those words, I bowed my head slightly to her fiancé and left the room, feeling embarrassed. Then Dorothy's fiancé called me by my name. "Maria, you were a senior consultant at the firm, right? I can't believe you're married to Dorothy's brother." Steve stared at me in disbelief. In fact, he was familiar to me. He was my junior at work until I quit after getting married. I had heard that he changed jobs after that, but neither of us had ever imagined we would meet again like this. "Dorothy, I've heard a lot about your sister-in-law before, but I never knew it was Maria. I thought she must be a terrible person because you've only said bad things about her. But we used to work together. I know who she is." Dorothy didn't seem to understand why Steve was angry. I wondered just how badly my character had been misrepresented, and I felt a little anxious. "You two knew each other?" At Dorothy's bitter smile and question, Steve desperately explained how we had worked closely together. I had helped him at work before and even lent him money when his mother was sick and needed money for surgery. It felt only natural for me to help him as his senior at work, and I had lent him money because he was in real trouble. At that time, my grandfather had just passed away and left me some inheritance, so I was easily in a position to be able to help him. I felt there was no need for Steve to feel so indebted to me, but when I took a moment to think about it and put myself in his shoes, I realized that the money must have been a real lifesaver. "Maria was a true friend to me, and yet you treat her like a housekeeper? I knew you could be harsh with your words, but I can't stand someone who treats people like this. I clearly need to rethink this. Our engagement is off." With a cold, incredulous gaze, Steve told Dorothy he was breaking off their engagement and tried to leave his seat. Desperate to stop him, Dorothy grabbed his jacket as he got up from the sofa. "No, it's not like that. This is just how Maria and I communicate. We joke around a lot. Right, Maria?" Dorothy looked to me for help in a panic, but I could only shake my head. "Sorry, I can't lie." Upon hearing this, Dorothy broke down crying on the spot. "Why are you ruining my marriage? It's your fault the engagement is off," she yelled and raised her hand to strike me, but my husband rushed in at that moment to intervene and held her back from hitting me. Still lashing out at me, Dorothy was slapped by my mother-in-law. "It's not Maria's fault. It's yours. You've been harassing her and causing trouble all this time. I won't tolerate it anymore. It's your own fault the engagement is off. You need to take accountability for your actions. You will leave the house by end of the month." This was the moment my mother-in-law finally snapped and moved to cut ties with her own daughter. "Mom, you're on Maria's side too?" With a face of disbelief, Dorothy tearfully stared at her mother. "You are not a child anymore. Take care of yourself." Mother-in-law said this, bowed her head to Steve, and returned to her bedroom. From the other room, only Dorothy's sobbing could be heard. Steve told me he would be in touch soon and then left our house. My husband and I exchanged glances and sighed together. Maybe it's time for us to start looking for a new home. My husband nodded at my words, and from then on we decided to move on with our lives as if Dorothy didn't exist. 3 months have passed since then, and my mother-in-law has moved to a senior housing facility. We also moved to a place as close as possible to my mother-in-law, and we are in the process of selling the family home. Dorothy stayed locked up in her room until the day we moved, but of course we couldn't just leave her behind, so we forcibly packed her belongings into boxes and sent them to a storage unit. On the day of the move, we gave my sister-in-law the bare essentials, the key to the storage unit, and the $3,000 severance payment we had received from my mother-in-law. Dorothy seemed to have lost all motivation due to her broken engagement and quit her job. I don't know what happened to her after that, and it seems Steve isn't in contact with her anymore. Steve told me that he was saved, once again, thanks to me. If I had gone through with that marriage, I would have definitely regretted it. You've always been my lifesaver, really. I can't help but feel guilty, thinking that in a way, Steve is the one who's been my lifesaver. I also wished for my sister-in-law to struggle in the end. But maybe if you do good deeds, you'll be rewarded like this. At least, that's what I thought this time. My sister-in-law treated me like a slave and constantly harassed me, which is probably why it ended like this. I've never seen or felt God, but from now on, I want to live a life where I can hold my head up high.
My husband had been unreachable for almost 3 days. He said, "I won't reply for a while." But my concerns were growing. I thought I should contact the police soon. Just as I was thinking that, I got a call from one of my subordinates. "Ma'am, your husband passed away in an accident." Huh? Why did she call me? I couldn't think about that right now. I hurried to the hospital. There, I saw my husband's unrecognizable body. My name is Harper, 28 years old. I got married 2 years ago and live with my husband while working at an IT company. We want to have children someday, but not yet. My husband's name is Christopher, 2 years older than me. He is very dedicated to his job. Just the other day, there was talk of him getting a promotion. That day, as soon as he got home from work, he happily rushed up to me.
"Harper, listen, I might get a position soon."
"Really? That's amazing."
"Yeah, I'm so happy. It's been tough, but I'm glad I worked hard."
"Christopher, you've been working so much on your days off. I'm really happy for you. Congratulations." Yes, my husband was so dedicated to his job that he gave up his days off to work. He often worked late and came home just before the date changed. I worried about his heavy workload at times, but finally, it paid off. Seeing my husband so happy made me feel happy too. I can't lose either, I thought. I'll try harder too. However, since that day, I started to notice something off about Christopher. His overtime increased even more, and he wouldn't come home until after midnight. His weekend work, which used to be only a few times a month, gradually increased. And last month, he went to work, even on Saturdays. Not only that, but I felt his attitude towards me had become somewhat cold. We used to go out on our days off, but that stopped recently. Isn't that strange? Why doesn't he seem at all tired, despite working so hard? Concerned, I decided to subtly ask my husband about it. I waited for him to come home late from work and brought up the conversation. "Hey, Christopher, can I talk to you for a minute?"
"What? I'm tired and want to sleep."
"Lately, you're always on your phone before bed. Even though you come home late, aren't you getting sleep deprived?"
"What are you trying to say? How I spend my free time is my business, right?"
"That might be true, but are you really that busy with work?" At my question, his expression stiffened for a moment. Not missing that, I pressed him further. "I understand you have a lot to do since you got promoted, but isn't it too hard? You have too many weekend work days. And isn't it bad for the company to overwork employees?"
"I have no choice. I'm not doing overtime and weekend work because I want to."
"But isn't it too much?"
"You don't understand my job, Harper, do you? Don't butt in when I'm tired from work."
With that, Christopher left the living room. After that, my uneasy feelings didn't go away. Then one day, I usually commuted by car, but on my way home from work, I got into an accident. I was rear-ended by another car and taken to the hospital by ambulance. I had bruises all over my body. After several tests to be safe, I was told to stay in the hospital for a few days. To have a change of clothes brought to me, I called my husband. However, no matter how many times I called, he didn't answer, and he didn't reply to the messages I sent. He should be done with work by now, so why? Until now, we could at least exchange messages during his overtime. I kept calling him every few minutes, and it finally connected an hour later. As I tried to explain the situation, he let out a big sigh.
Ugh, you're so persistent. Can't you tell I'm working overtime if I don't answer the phone?
I'm sorry, but that's not the issue right now.
Huh? What do you mean?
Actually, I got into an accident on my way home, and I'm in the hospital now. My whole body hurts, but they said there's no life-threatening injuries.
An accident? Ugh, what a pain you're causing.
I involuntarily let out a, huh? At his unexpected response. He continued mercilessly, as I was at a loss for words.
Stop getting into accidents when I'm busy. I'm not paying for the car repairs, all right?
I understand, but I need you to bring me a change of clothes.
What? Why do I have to do that? I'm tired from work, and it's like a punishment game to go to the hospital for someone who got into an accident due to carelessness.
Carelessness? Why are you talking like that? Besides, it wasn't my fault. It was the other drivers.
Stop nagging. Anyway, I'm not going, and I won't reply for a while. Figure it out yourself.
The call ended there. The busy tone echoed in my ear, pushing my heart to the limit. Before I knew it, I was in tears. Why did he speak like that? Aren't you worried about your wife who had an accident? He used to prioritize me over work. If I could, I'd want to get a change of clothes myself. My parents live far away, so I can't ask for their help. I sent several messages to my husband afterward, but he never brought my things. I had no choice but to buy everything I needed at the hospital store. Since then, I tried contacting my husband a few times, but 3 days had passed without a reply. He said he wouldn't reply for a while, but I was getting worried. No matter what, it's unusual not to have any contact for this long. What if he got into an accident too? That anxiety crossed my mind. That's when I heard a knock on the hospital room door. When I responded with yes, my coworker Jasmine, who I usually get along with, came to visit me. Jasmine, you came! Thank you!
I was surprised when I heard you had been in an accident after I contacted you since you hadn't been at work for a while.
It's not a big deal. Just some bruises and a broken bone.
It's more than enough. But I'm glad. You seem to be doing well.
For a while, we chatted and laughed about trivial things. As visiting hours were ending, Jasmine started to get ready to leave. But then, she stopped and looked troubled. I cautiously asked her, Jasmine, what's wrong?
I'm sorry, Harper. I don't think I should say this now, but I saw it.
Saw? What did you see?
I saw your husband walking with Daisy.
What? When did that happen?
3 days ago.
The Daisy Jasmine mentioned was a junior coworker at our company. I had been her mentor when she was a new employee. Even now, a few years later, we'd go to lunch together once a week. Why would she be with Christopher? Daisy and my husband should have last met at our wedding. Could it be? But there's no way they would do something like that. Despite thinking it was impossible, the worst-case scenario crossed my mind. According to Jasmine, she saw my husband with a suitcase and Daisy 3 days ago. Since then, Daisy has been on paid leave. I hesitantly called my husband's office, and my suspicion was confirmed. He had also applied for paid leave 3 days ago. At that moment, my suspicion turned to certainty. My beloved husband and the junior I cared for, being betrayed by both of them at the same time. Probably my husband's increased overtime and working on weekends were because he was meeting her. No, maybe they were already involved before that. As I recalled my husband's suspicious behavior, more and more things started to make sense. Ah, so that's why he became so cold. Surprisingly, it all made sense to me. Unconsciously, I called my husband. I hardly contacted him these past few days, thinking he wouldn't respond anyway. He probably wouldn't pick up after just a few attempts. But I couldn't just let him do as he pleased. I kept ringing his phone until he answered. 30 minutes after I started calling, my husband finally answered, sounding annoyed.
What's your problem? I told you I wouldn't answer for a while.
Why? Are you so busy that you can't even answer a call from your wife?
Of course, I'm working every day.
Even though you're on paid leave until tomorrow, what kind of work are you doing? Assuming he hadn't been caught yet, my husband hesitated for a moment. Still thinking he could deceive me, he quickly started making excuses.
What are you talking about? I didn't take any paid leave.
No use playing dumb. I already confirmed with the company.
No, well, actually, I just suddenly wanted to take it easy. I've been relaxing at home these past few days.
Oh, really? With Daisy? Even preparing a suitcase? I already know everything. Just confess. I couldn't help but raise my voice. Then my husband, realizing he couldn't hide it any longer, revealed his true colors.
Ah, so you found out. Yes, I'm on a trip with Daisy. Now that you know, stop bothering me, you ugly woman.
So, that's how it is. Why? Why with Daisy?
Why do you think? She's younger and cuter than you.
For such a reason.
Enough already. I'm having fun on this trip. Don't bother me. Don't worry. I'll divorce you when I get back.
He said,
See ya.
and hung up the phone. It was right after that. The love that I had for my husband turned into hatred. In an instant. I can't forgive him. To be betrayed in such a terrible way? I won't let them have their way. I'll definitely send them to hell. That's when I decided to take revenge on them. But before I could take matters into my own hands, divine punishment would come to them. The next day I was discharged from the hospital and started to regain some mobility. To prepare for my revenge, I opened my smartphone to search for a lawyer's office. Just then my phone rang. Daisy's name appeared on the screen, my husband's affair partner. Surprised for a moment, but I couldn't run away now. I gathered my courage and answered the call. Hello?
Harper? Ma'am? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Isn't it common sense to apologize in person?
Yes, you're right. But that's not the point right now. Huh?
Daisy's voice was somewhat shaky. Then she said something that made me doubt my ears.
Your husband has died in an accident. What?
I was so shocked that I couldn't find the right words. Confused, I barely managed to respond to Daisy.
He's dead? What are you talking about? Christopher is on a cheating trip with you, isn't he? Yes, that's true. But on the way home, Christopher got caught in an accident. According to Daisy's story, it seems the two of them were in an accident on their way home from the airport. Christopher was hit by a car, and although an ambulance was called right away, he didn't move a muscle. To my surprise, the hospital Christopher was taken to was the same one I was staying at. I quickly hung up the phone, explained the situation to the nurse, and headed to my husband's side. I had to move using crutches as my broken bone hadn't fully healed. Since I heard he had died, I assumed I'd be taken to a morgue or something, but incredibly, Christopher was still alive. However, he was seriously injured. Just after I arrived, a breathless Daisy rushed in. Seeing Christopher lying in the bed, she collapsed on the spot when she realized he was still alive. I had a lot to say, but unfortunately Christopher was in critical condition.
I told Daisy we'd talk later, and we each went home that day. Days later, Christopher barely pulled through, but the accident left him paralyzed from the waist down, forcing him into a wheelchair. My in-laws were furious when they found out about the affair trip. Although they must have felt something, seeing their challenged son, they scolded him clearly, saying,
"You brought this on yourself by having an affair."
After my in-law left, I called Daisy and decided to have a talk with her and my husband. When I arrived at my husband's hospital room, they were having a loud argument.
"If you hadn't pushed me that time, none of this would have happened. It's all your fault."
What? You're the one who wanted to take that route. Don't blame me.
"What did you say?" "In the first place, this happened because you wanted to go on a trip. I paid for everything. Give me my money back. Pay for the treatment, you lousy woman. You hurt the man you love, so you should pay, right?"
Don't be ridiculous. Who would get serious with a guy like you? This was just a fling. I'll never see you again.
"What?"
The two of them carried on their unbearable argument, apparently not realizing I was there. I couldn't take it anymore. I forcibly opened the door to the hospital room, took a deep breath, and shouted at them. Enough. It's because you had an affair in the first place that this happened. Take your blame game somewhere else.
Harper.
Ma'am. Finally realizing I was there, their faces quickly stiffened. Ignoring their confusion, I continued. How can you still argue in a situation like this? Do you even understand the situation you're in now? Christopher was the first to answer that question.
"Harper, don't worry. I'm breaking up with this stupid woman."
So?
So I realized that it's always been you for me, Harper."
Huh, what are you saying now? We're getting divorced, right?
"What?"
I couldn't help but burst into laughter at my husband's dumbfounded expression. Didn't you say it? When I get home, we'll get a divorce, or what? Now that you've fought with your affair partner, you want to stay married to me. Are you an idiot? There's no way I'd spend my life with a piece of trash like you.
Harper, why? Didn't you love me?"
Don't mess with me. Who betrayed that love first? It was you. After all that talk about getting a divorce, you want to get back together when it's convenient for you? I'm not as cheap as you think. If you understand that, never show up in front of me again. Keep regretting this for the rest of your life, you jerk. My husband was stunned by my yelling. Daisy was pale and trembling. Later, I was discharged from the hospital and decided to stay at my parents' house for a while. After that, my divorce from Christopher was finalized through a lawyer. I demanded alimony from him and Daisy, which they paid in full. Christopher was fired from his job due to this incident. It turned out he'd been using company money for their affair. Adding to his paralysis, he was easily dismissed. All that remained for him was a claim for damages from the company. Finding a new job with his condition would probably be difficult. It didn't take long for word of Daisy's affair with my husband to spread throughout the company. She was met with cold stares and eventually couldn't stand the atmosphere and began skipping work without permission. As a result, I heard she finally submitted her resignation. Now those two will probably never lead a decent life again. Even so, I don't feel sorry for them. This is a disaster they brought upon themselves. As for me, I rented an apartment near my workplace and started a new life. Many colleagues show concern or curiosity, but honestly, my feelings are mixed, and I can't describe how I feel. But such trivial rumors will probably die down soon. Now, I want to enjoy my life without being swayed by others.